When I have a question, I say, I have a question, so that everybody stops talking and they look at me. When I don't do that, I can't get a word in.
I'm going to steal that. I love that tactic.
Tip for the day. If you've learned nothing else from this podcast, you've just got a worthy tip to try.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, 100% steal it. Make use of it.
Hello, and welcome to the Cisco Learning Network podcast. In this episode, we're kicking off a series called Women in Tech in honor of International Women's Month by bringing you this roundtable discussion hosted by Vice President of Learning and Certifications, Par Merat.
I think the common thread, if I'm hearing all of you, is learning. Learning new skills, adjusting, whether they're technology skills, but then also bringing those together with social skills.
Par hears from three women who currently work in IT about their experiences in the tech industry and about their certification journeys. This discussion features senior engineer Maren Mahoney.
I got really into the hardware. Early on, I was also doing software like animation renderings, among other things too. I am pretty smart, but I'm not smart enough to do both of those well. I had to pick one, so I picked the hardware, which I find funny because now all these years later in collaboration, I mostly work with software.
Consulting systems engineer Micheline Murphy.
It's like the biggest pun about network engineering is that sometimes the human networking is the more important part of the network engineering. I got my next role after that through the human connections I knew.
And cybersecurity specialist Zoe Rose.
So if I do a certification or even just the training and say, this is rubbish, I don't enjoy this, I'm not going to go for a job that's what I do. Whereas if I do a certification and say, wow, this is amazing, I'm really inspired, I know that that's where I want to go.
Together, these four women discuss how learning and certifications have played a vital role throughout their career and offer their advice for how to bolster confidence in your own career. And because the theme for International Women's Month is to inspire inclusion, we hope that hearing from these amazing women will help our listeners to consider how they might be able to inspire inclusion in their daily lives, and especially in the workplace.
Thank you all so much for being here. In the crazy world we live in, making time for things like this, it's a great opportunity to come together and have a discussion. But I also know, everybody's got a really full schedule. So very much appreciate everyone being on this call. So why don't we start off with just an introduction? Who each of you are, what you're doing at this point in your career, and, why you're interested in talking with us today about not only women in tech, but just life in tech and what it means to you and what you're working on. Maren, you want to go first?
Back in the 70s, I was working on mainframes when I was in middle school. And then I decided, oh my, that's for nerds, and I would never touch another computer again. And then, the internet happened. So I really got started back in the early 90s with Windows 3.1 and Office installed in diskette in those days, moving jumpers for IRQs and all that, and I was good at it. I earned a couple of MCSE versions, then my CCNA. In 2000, my boss came into my office and asked, hey, do you want to learn this, voice over internet protocol thing? And I'm, sure, I'm always game for new stuff. That's how I really got started in Cisco land. I ended up working for Cisco for a while, and then I taught. Now I'm consulting. I've earned my CCIE, and I'm a VIP, and I'm in this lovely podcast.
I think that's a great intro. Micheline, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name's Micheline Murphy. I am currently a consulting systems engineer at Worldwide Technology, which is one of the big Cisco partners. Before that, I was an implementation engineer implementing Cisco ACI for customers. And before that, I was a trial lawyer for 16 years. Got to the point where everything was the same, which is a terrible thing to say about crimes because people are so imaginative about their crimes. My husband one day said, you should look at this as an opportunity to do something different. I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, you should do what I do because I think you'd be really good at it. And I looked at him and I said, I honestly don't know what you do. That was my introduction into IT. So I've been here for quite a few years now. I'm really enjoying it and happy to share my experiences as a third career person in IT, not as young as everybody else and not as male or white as everybody else.
There you go. Zoe, welcome.
Hey, so I apologize in advance. There may be children in the background. I'm Zoe. I've worked in technology for, I don't actually know how long. I like to say I look younger than I am, so that it makes me seem like I'm more experienced. But I actually started because I was in a not great environment, and tech was my like getaway because I could hide in the server room and not have to deal with people. So it was like a great way of like separating myself. And then I just kind of learned that through that, I always viewed it as I didn't have to talk to people, but I actually found that in my career, it was better to talk to people, and the social skills was actually what made you stand apart. And so it went like completely opposite of what I got into tech for. And I did network architecture for a few years. I was actually part of the Cisco Live Dream Team in 2015, where we set up Cisco Live, which was a lot of fun. If you ever see me running around in pictures with a yellow cape, that's what that's from. And that's where a lot of people actually know me from. So I was part of NetCAD, and then I did NetCAD Dream Team thing. And I did consulting for a few years, and then I moved over into security, where I've been ever since. I've lived and worked in 4 different countries. This is my 4th country. I've worked in other countries, but never lived in other ones. It's been a little bit of a journey of like growing up in tech, and tech has been kind of my main thing for so long that it's now being a mum has been like, I have to relearn how to be social.
And this is what this discussion is all about, right? Like, how do you balance feet up in the air and mummy and all of the rest? So, it sounds like we've all had kind of a prior life coming into tech. And what brought me into tech, it was an evolution, right? I started in sales, then got into developer programs, then got into ecosystem revenue generating technology partnerships, and then had the pleasure of coming to Cisco Learning and certifications. And this is where there's that culmination. So what in particular got you interested in IT, and more specifically, what got you attracted to networking for a career?
Well, it's logical the way that the law sometimes is not. It's objective in a way that the law is very rarely. Your metrics of success are pretty often, if you'll pardon the pun, binary. Did my packets get there? Yes, no. So I think in that respect, the network engineering is a bit easier than the law, but a lot of the same logical analysis is required. The ability to look at problems and break them down into simpler parts is required. The ability to be able to identify issues when you're talking to customers, that's the same. The ability to be able to troubleshoot a problem and work through a project logically, I think those are the same. So, in terms of the logical mechanics of both sets of disciplines, there's a lot of overlaps, and I found that gratifying. So in terms of what continues to attract me to networking, I love that networking is always changing. I love that the technology is always interesting and fresh, and there's always something new to learn. And then surprisingly, I also love that there are conversations that I have with my customers every day to help them kind of navigate through what's new, what's different, what has changed, and to help make their lives easier.
I've talked about some of it already. I would say my mother was a big proponent of me getting into IT. She herself, she got a certificate from a Vo-Tech in COBOL and Fortran programming back in the early 80s.
In case you've never heard of a Vo-Tech school, that's a vocational technical school, which trains high school age individuals in the skills required to complete the tasks of a specific job.
Oh, and she was a hot property having just those credentials there. And she thought I would be really good at the IT thing, but I pushed back. But, fast forward a couple of decades, and I was working for a company in New York City. They did graphic arts. And I was just office person. I made coffee for clients and kept the books because I knew double entry accounting, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they started getting requests for PowerPoint shows. And so they bought a bunch of Gateway computers and handed them to me and said, hey, figure this out. And so, installed operating systems and other software on diskette, because that was how we did it back in the day. Moving, jumpers to set IRQs on cards and SCSI termination. And I got really, really into the hardware. Early on, I was also doing software like animation renderings, among other things too. And I am pretty smart, but I'm not smart enough to do both of those well. I had to pick one, so I picked the hardware, which I find funny because now all these years later in collaboration, I mostly work with software. So from there, I worked on a help desk, ran a help desk. I got into phones and system administration and eventually got my CCNA and started down that path. And here I am today.
And I think the common thread, if I'm hearing all of you, is learning. Learning new skills, adjusting, whether they're technology skills, but then also bringing those together with social skills. And Micheline, I love the fact that you got bored in the legal world, but I would have to imagine that a lot of those skills, negotiations, understanding, digging in, a different way of troubleshooting. Can you expand on that if that's sort of hitting the mark with you?
Oh, no, that totally hits the mark with me. So my brain is really analytical. And, as a lawyer, that serves you really well because it gives you the ability to really be able to break down an argument, which is sometimes kind of a slippery sort of thing, and be able to present it clearly. When I transitioned into IT, I knew that coming into IT as a brand new woman, I was going to need to leverage everything I had to stand out. And the thing that I had the most of were, the written skills that I used as a lawyer, the speaking skills I used as a lawyer, the communication skills, the storytelling even, all of those skills that I'd honed as a lawyer, I knew that that was going to be my standout. And I know that's a really funky standout to have as you're thinking about an IT career, but everybody's got something like that, some little ace in their back pocket that makes them stand out. Now, whether or not they ever pull that ace out of their pocket, that's kind of up to you to figure out what that is and then pull it out when you need it. But I was determined I was going to pull that thing out early and often. So that ended up being the thing that I actually capitalized on to set myself apart and to give myself the extra boost. One of the things that I thought was really funny is as I was starting out, somebody told me that the technology was always changing and that was going to be the easiest part to handle. Maren's making the face at me. That was going to be the quote unquote easiest part to handle. And I kind of took that to heart. I know I have a good capacity for learning. I think we all do. Par, you pointed that out, that's something that as IT specialists, we've got to be able to grow with the changing technology every single day. So I knew that was going to be something that I would have to keep sharp. But in terms of just being able to set myself apart, I used what I had.
That really resonates because I think each of us bring, that little superhero that we lean into, because there's always going to be someone who's more technically adept than you. So how do you work around that and those skills that you bring? Zoe, you kind of mentioned the whole social aspect of it. Are you finding that that's more of a superpower, or are you finding that you're leaning into other superpowers?
When I started my career, I was always told that any negative relationship or any negative feeling you got from work is you chose this career, so it's your fault that it's like that. I was not the most social person. I was quite a shy person. Nobody believes me now, but I was actually very shy. I'm still very shy. But I realized that if I put on a different hat, like it was almost like I was putting on a persona for work of a confident, social person. And I built those relationships in the business. Like in IT, you build your relationship with the other techs you work with, but also bridging that relationship to the non-technical people. I found that actually set me apart a lot and actually made it easier for me to succeed, especially because I work in security. Security is not the most loved topic. Most people, when you say, oh, I work in security, they say, oh, And then they're like, oh, you're going to yell at me for something. Building that relationship was super important to succeed. And it definitely made me stand out because I understood the business, because I would build that relationship. And then if I could understand the business, I could tailor my solutions to work for the business. So people were more willing to listen because they felt like I was on their side. I wasn't fighting against them, which is critical when it comes to security.
Yeah, absolutely. Maren, what about you? You've had a very long, illustrious career, and you and I have seen a lot of changes. What did you come in with as a superpower, and how have you had to modify that over time?
So when I did my intro, I sort of skipped a couple of decades. But between the time I graduated high school until I got into computers, I'm in and out of college. I've had every major you can think of. I've had every part-time job. I scooped poop out of people's yards. I've done legal coding. I've worked as an optician. I loaded planes for UPS. I spent 4 years in the Army. I mean, I have done it all. So what I think I bring to the table is that breadth of experience. I can talk to anyone and meet them where they are. I mentioned earlier that I taught for nearly 15 years, and what I taught was Cisco certification courses in a variety of disciplines and mostly in collaboration space, and I was really good at it. To Micheline's point, it started getting, kind of repetitive, a little bored, right? So now I'm consulting. I work for Blue Ally, formerly Net Craftsman, as a senior engineer. But that superhero power is that breadth of experience, being able to talk to anyone wherever they are and bringing them along. I find for myself, if I can help someone so that they can understand and they can do it for themselves, right? That whole teach a man to fish thing, right? Then I've had a good day. And that makes me really, really happy.
That sort of is the common theme across us all here, that we're able to relate, translate technical challenges into the business outcomes and create that relationship, sort of that trusted ally. I'm going to throw this out there. Do you think being female helps in that? Is that a superpower in and of itself?
As a teacher, I'd say yes, because I'm not threatening. Guys come into my class and they're not afraid to ask a question. Whereas, and I've seen this in action, if there's a guy in front teaching, it's like, oh, I don't want to look a certain way, whatever that is in front of the guys, but they're happy to ask me a question. So, in that respect, yes. That said, have I encountered the, oh, you're a girl kind of stuff? Well, absolutely. I remember having an exchange with a gentleman who was completely dismissive, even though I was his technical contact, right? And I ended up sending him an email which had the CCIE information in the signature, and it was all, oh, you're a CCIE, you are now worthy to talk to. Ooh.
That's so funny that you bring that up, that being a teacher in IT as a woman is subversive, and it kind of gets under the posturing that a lot of our colleagues kind of take part into. I have this very vivid recollection of the first workshop that I conducted with a customer, and I was being shadowed by one of my senior male colleagues just to make sure that I had backup if I needed it. I didn't need it, but afterwards he was like, you should just tell them what they need to do. You should be much more assertive. And I looked at him and I'm like, dude who can tell another dude, just do it my way. And I can't even remember if I had the energy at the time to just explain to him that, a woman who hasn't established her expertise yet, telling a bunch of dudes what to do and do it my way, it doesn't go over well.
I did a podcast with Rita. I think it was Rita.
Zoe is referring to Rita Younger, who is the practice lead for data center networking at a global technology service provider. And we'll actually have Rita on the podcast soon to discuss her own experiences from her tech career.
And we talked about credentialing and how you have to establish yourself and prove that you know what you're talking about. And I had to do that so much for the beginning of my career that it just became natural for me. And so when I moved to the UK, it was super weird for me that my colleagues just took my word for it. Like I would say, oh, I would do it this way. And they would just listen. And that was quite late into my career, but I was like, why are you listening to me? Like, I haven't proved myself yet. So it was super, super weird.
Was it the credentialing? Was it the certifications that brought that or?
Well, that's why I went to college. I only went to college to have the piece of paper that somebody else validated that I knew what I was talking about. Because I already owned a company whilst I was in college. I actually went back to college after being an IT manager. I didn't really technically need to go to college. My bank account definitely didn't want me to go to college, but I needed that. I need the validation from someone else. And then I always needed to prove, as Micheline said, that I knew what I was talking about before I was taken seriously. And it's only been since living and working in Europe that I've not had that, where people actually take me at my word. Like, my current colleagues take me at my word, and I'm constantly like, why? Like still now, and after I don't know, over 10 years in working, I'm still shocked. But it's somebody that said, you can use being a woman to your advantage. Or maybe it was you, Micheline, actually, you might have said it even. And it's, you are unique. By default, you are unique. So use that to your advantage. You stand out already, so make use of that. And I did in my career. I mean, there were times when I owned my own consulting company, or an MSP, it was a managed service provider. I would walk in and I'd have a consultant with me because it was a big job. I needed 2 people, and I'd ask the questions and the client would direct them at the consultant, who happened to be male. And it would frustrate me. It would frustrate me so much because I was the one that would plan everything. I was the more experienced person, but I was the woman. And so I realized that even though there was that perception, I could use that to my advantage, because they would maybe disregard what I said until I actually proved that I knew more, you know? So there were things that I would do, like little tricks that I would learn. Like, for example, Tom always thought it was funny that when I'm part of the Tech Field Day delegate team, when I have a question, I say, I have a question, so that everybody stops talking and they look at me. When I don't do that, I can't get a word in.
I'm going to steal that. I love that tactic. I am stealing that.
Tip for the day. If you've learned nothing else from this podcast, you've just got a worthy tip to try.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, 100% steal it. Make use of it.
Yeah. I find that that's hard sometimes too, is to get in a word edgewise, especially in WebExes when there aren't the social cues that, like, you know, I'm holding my hand up, I have a question. I happen to be very fortunate to work in a place where I am getting the rest of the guys used to working with me. And the ability to be able to say, I am here and I am going to talk now, and then have people stop and not talk over you has been something that I've, needed to fight for. It's been difficult because in the law, it's very, very structured. You talk, and then opposing counsel talks, and the judge talks, and then you talk again. Everybody has their opportunity to do so. And to have to learn to get into that scrap for me, has been really quite the challenge.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a couple things. One is, hey, I have the credentialing, so to speak, whether it's a CCIE certification or a college degree, so that there's the proof in the pudding, so to speak. Then there's the social aspect of it. Like, how do I even bring myself to be noticed in a present situation?
Well, you could do what I did and wear a bright yellow cape.
There you go. You could. Say more about this bright yellow cape for our listeners who may not be familiar.
Well, at Cisco Live, they didn't do this year, actually, but all the previous years, you could win a cape for being most socially active on social media. And the first year that I did it, it was in 2015, and it was just happened to be a bright yellow cape. And so most people know me because they have pictures of me running around in Cisco Live with a cape that came down to like my calves. Like, it was massive. I'm not a very big person, so there's that. But even the police stopped me and was like, Comic-Con's not still next week.
You're here a little early. Well, this last round, though, you made yourself noticeable because you had a little companion.
I did. Well, I had 2 companions, actually. I'm a single mom, so getting out and about without children is very difficult. And so this time round, I brought both my girls with me on Sunday, and then just my newborn with me Monday and Thursday. I'm on maternity leave at the moment, so...
Let me ask a question. Being women, we have unique loads. I'm not saying people in general don't, depending on, what you're responsible for in terms of your family and responsibilities. The same can be applied to anyone, really. But typically and generally, it falls more on the woman to take maternity leave, to make sure the house is done, to schedule the doctor appointments, to do all of those things. And I think we're all aware of what those challenges are. But does being in IT help that? Or does being in IT add more pressure to that? I mean, as a lawyer, I would have imagined you've got specific times that you have to be somewhere. In IT, is there at least a little more flexibility that you're allowed?
I think it depends on your role. Like, I'm currently in a non-operational role, so it does have much more flexibility, but my role is changing. So I will be in an operational role, which leads to less flexibility because you have on-call. And being a single mom, I have even less flexibility because I have 2 children that they don't have the flexibility. So being in IT can be very challenging. And it is one thing that I have to consider when I accept a role. Is this something that I physically can do? Can I physically be at the office at that time? Can I meet the requirements of the on-call requirements? If there's an incident, I work in security, can I respond to that incident in a way that's sufficient for the business?
Yeah.
Right. So this happens as well in the law because it's also very male dominated. And by male dominated, I mean all of the upper echelons, the partners and the decision makers and the judges are by and large much more male, although there's more female presence in law schools these days. The decision makers are still very much male. But, the idea that we as women have to be cognizant of all of the extra duties that we have. I look around at my male colleagues in, my other engineers. They are lucky, I think, that they've got a partner who is taking on the roles of childcare, home care. They have the flexibility to do the things that they get to do, and they can be that much more flexible. And as a general rule, I have never had that kind of flexibility. Now, I don't have children, but to be able to say, oh, my partner's going to take care of that for me. Those are the sorts of things that are just extra and oftentimes kind of invisible hurdles. I think that the COVID pandemic was a little bit of a mixed blessing in the respect that, as everybody's forced to be home, a lot of my male friends were like, I never realized how much work it was to teach my kids at home or take care of them at home, or, how much it took to run the house, things like that. I hope that it stays.
Well, I think definitely there was a lot more empathy. I mean, I remember when I started my family, if there was a little voice in the background, you were constantly, oh no, on edge, and how is this going to be perceived? And now, it's demonstrated by Zoe, hey, bring the kids, right? We want to hear from the kids. And I think it was during the pandemic, that CNN special where that consultant was on and his little kid came in the runner. It was hysterical and everyone accepted it. I am hopeful that is now part of the working culture. And Maren, I'm sure you have seen improvements over time.
Oh, heck yeah. I was just going to say, I've been very specific about choosing companies I work for, in no small part for the sort of work-life balance that they offer. When I left teaching, and I wanted to go to the new company, there was literally one company I wanted to work for, and that's where I ended up. I'm grateful for that. Because when I was working for Sunset Learning as an instructor, the jobs before that, those companies encourage the ability for their engineers to, do their lives, do their things they need to do. That's way different than when, I went on interviews in my 20s where I was asked, well, what are you going to do when you have children? And I was like, excuse me, you're asking me that in an interview at all? That's much less of an issue anymore, aside from being illegal nowadays. I'm grateful that I have the ability to pick and choose where I work. Not all people, certainly not all women, get to make those choices. It's made my life easier. And I will certainly say that the older I get, the less tolerant I am of the inability to balance work and life. I did the 80-hour weeks when I was young, and it was kind of fun when I did it, but I don't want to do that anymore, right? And I'm old enough, I don't have to. Your point about, do I think it's easier in IT? I'd say yes. This is a higher skill, higher paying field. So companies end up offering you more resources, more flexibility.
We're in IT, we have the credentials in IT. How has your relationship with Cisco and the Cisco certifications helped that progression? I've heard it's helped from being able to demonstrate your skill proficiency at that very high end. Zoe and Micheline, how has it helped you in that stepping up both from a financial perspective, a career perspective, and that being present as a voice in the room?
I think it's given me the confidence to acknowledge that I know more than I think I do. Like when I was an IT manager, I was successful, but I didn't feel successful and I questioned my capability. And that's why I went back to college. I needed that paper. But doing the NetAcad training and then the NetAcad Dream Team stuff and building the community within Cisco via Cisco Live, it's benefited me not just from the technical side, but the confidence side. So it's helped me a lot with the confidence. And then also building that community. It has been hugely supportive, and through the Cisco Champion program.
The Cisco Champion program is some of the best, brightest, and most passionate technologists. As a Cisco Champion, you can get early insights into new Cisco products and solutions, as well as receive access to Cisco's all-star engineers. As a Cisco Champion, you can expand your own network of technology enthusiasts, provide feedback on Cisco products and solutions, and receive certain perks at Cisco Live, such as special keynote seating.
Through the Cisco Champion program, you can talk with other experts, and then you realize that you know more than you think you do.
Yeah, at our last community dinner at Cisco Live, we thanked everyone for being part of the community. They actually shared stories and really suggested that this community at Cisco is so strong because of the people in it. That's all of you here as well. And I'm going to kind of equate the culture of the Cisco community to kind of a sisterhood, if you will. It's just so supportive, and there's not competition. And what I observe is everyone helping everyone. And Micheline, you've done so much in the community. Two-part question, how have these certifications helped you? And you did a lovely blog about this as well, but how has the community also helped with that?
Wow. So let's start with the certifications. When I decided to make the career shift, I said, I'm going to go into IT. I'm going to go into network engineering because I thought it was really fascinating and interesting. I don't know anything. I don't know what a switch is. I don't know what a router is. A bridge, is that something you drive over? So I was really aware that not only was I the complete novice, but that at some point in time, I would be able to take advantage of being the dumbest person in the room and capture that voice, because I wouldn't always be the dumbest person in the room. Maybe someday I might be one of the smarter people in the room. I had some great advice to look into the CCNA and the CCNP and go for those. Go figure out what was interesting and exciting in one of those certifications and go for those. And then if you got to CCNP and you wanted to keep going, go for CCIE and just keep going until a job landed in your lap. So I pretty much did that. And by the time I had my first interview with a hiring manager looking at like a real IT job, the hiring manager is like, oh yeah, I've read your stuff. We don't need to talk about your technical expertise because I already know you have it. So let's talk about how you fit with the team.
Then you brought your superpowers in.
Yeah, everybody sweats the technical interview. And I was like, no different. It's that imposter syndrome. You always think you know less than you really do. And, I was really nervous that I didn't have the chops that it took to do this job. And when he said that, I was like, oh wait, you're talking about me. I was really taken aback. It actually took me a minute. But in terms of like community, it's like the biggest pun about network engineering is that sometimes the human networking is the more important part of the network engineering. I got my next role after that through the human connections I knew. It had been a role that had been open for quite some time. They couldn't exactly just find the right person. Somebody said to somebody else, who said to somebody else, who said, I know someone who might fit. The networking in network engineering or IT in general is really active. A lot of people put feelers out who are like, who do you know that's good? And when you build your brand, your personal brand as a leader in this space or influencer. I prefer leader. When you build your brand as a leader in this space, your name starts coming up. Opportunities start blossoming. And it might not be a job opportunity, but it might be something like talk on somebody's podcast or write an article for somebody's blog. And then the next thing you know, you've got all of these great friends and you're meeting at Cisco Live and you're having, a tall frosty beverage, and here's the next opportunity. So, we're having this side conversation about how we're all introvert by nature, but the networking in the network industry or the IT industry, the human networking is also just as important. And again, it comes back to those soft skills and how do you interact with people and how do you bring your individual uniqueness to the table and make it your superpower.
You sort of transitioned to probably the wrap-up question for today. What advice do you give other individuals and specifically women who are interested in pursuing a career in IT and specifically in networking?
So my mom said to me when I was young, when it comes time to pick a thing to do for a living, go do what the guys do. It's usually more fun and almost always pays better, she said. And she also was big on instilling the idea that we, her kids, her daughters in particular, could do whatever we set our minds to. So I would say don't let imposter syndrome stop you. To Micheline's point, part of my experience, my journey in the community, when I realized I could answer other people's questions, it was really the opening of the door for me. Yes, I really do know what I'm doing. If I have a seat at the table, then I belong in the room with everyone else who is sitting at that table. And I don't have to think I'm pretending because I'm not. I own it. Own yourself. You are not in that room by accident.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Zoe, get a word in before your earphones get pulled off.
I'll see how long they last this time. I think for mine, celebrate your wins, because in my career, I've had a lot of wins, but I didn't celebrate them. I just kind of was like, I don't know why they gave that to me. I don't know why they did that. Like, I remember back in 2017, I was in Vogue, the magazine, and I never celebrated that win. I didn't, because I didn't really think it was a win. I was like, well, I don't know why they had me on there, but I got cool photos, And then it took me years and years to realize that by not celebrating the wins, you're basically telling the people that have said you're doing a good job that they're wrong. And that's the only way that I actually was able to build the confidence to be like, okay, I need to celebrate my wins because I shouldn't be, second guessing these other people, So I think that's a big thing, is celebrating your own wins.
And a guy wouldn't hide it either, just saying.
Yep. A guy wouldn't hide it, yeah.
No, but I was always taught to be quiet and to not take up space. And the way that I got over it was saying, if I respect your opinion, I can't then criticize your opinion when you were saying I'm doing a good job.
That's awesome. I would say that for every single person out there, you have some unique talent that you bring to the table other than your IT skills. And whatever it happens to be, figure out what your ace in your back pocket is and use it. I take advantage of that. I use it all the time. And, there's no hiding that I'm a woman when I walk into the room, so I might as well not. It's kind of like, don't hide your talent under a bushel barrel or whatever they say. Just let it shine. Let yourself shine and go do whatever it is that you want to do.
And last question, getting in networking in particular, getting a Cisco certification, good, bad, indifferent, would you highly recommend it and do it all over again?
I would say I have probably the least amount of certifications of the two ladies here, I'm pretty sure, because I've always avoided certifications. I hate certifications because I have test anxiety. So when I go to write it, I forget everything I remembered or everything I studied. However, saying that, I highly recommend getting some, especially for people that struggle with confidence, because doing NetAcad for me, huge benefit to my confidence. And then the few certifications that I have gotten over time have massively improved my confidence, which allowed me to present myself much more effectively. regardless if it was a certification I needed or not. Like I have a Splunk Architect certification. I don't use it. I don't use Splunk at the moment. But the confidence of I was able to do that and I was able to get that hugely impacted me. It helps you know what you want. So if I do a certification or even just the training and say, this is rubbish, like I don't enjoy this, I'm not going to go for a job that's what I do. Whereas if I do a certification and say, wow, this is amazing, like I'm really inspired, I know that that's where I want to go. So it's almost like a condensed way of finding the route that you want to go to, because there's so many jobs out there that figuring out what you want to do is almost as difficult as getting the bloody job.
Yeah, and Micheline, you took the bar, so there's a good comparison. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I took the bar. In comparison to folks who think that the CCIE is the ninth plane of hell, when I sat for the bar was 2 days, handwritten essay. 2 days. No typewriters. Yeah, boo on that. Certifications. Yes. I leveraged certifications to the max just to get into IT because I didn't want to have to start at the very, very bottom because I'm old and tired and starting out at the bottom is for the pits. So I wanted to start out at middle. And these days I work with some really, really great teams who value my contributions, who see, that my soft skills and my technical expertise and my work with my customers is at the level of excellence that they are wanting to keep. And so, being able to have a great team around you that helps to reinforce your confidence is an amazing thing. But certainly, to get there for me took a lot of work. And so that first step of getting the certification and getting that feedback, even if it's just for yourself, that you deserve a seat at this table and that what you have to say is worth listening to, is worth it.
That's great. And Maren, quick wrap up to this whole discussion.
So 3 things. Number 1, to Zoe's point about confidence, your self-confidence, having that piece of paper that says, yes, I can, excellent. Second, sort of in general these days, having certifications is very important for job hunting. 30 years ago, it was, do you have a college degree? Yes, no. There's your 2 piles of resumes. Nowadays, you've got, HR managers at best or computers scanning resumes, and they're looking for very specific things, so certifications help. And the third thing is, especially as you get more advanced, like, my CCIE in my case, you get to throw down. If someone's going to challenge me on a piece of technical information, the fact that I have this list of certs backing me means that they really have to prove that I'm wrong. And, I'm willing to be wrong. Don't get me wrong on that. But especially being a woman in IT, walking into that room with that list of certs, I've already established credibility.
That's excellent. I really hope that in 10 years from now, when the next person hosts this, it'll be a different conversation other than we're still trying to bring our voices forward and we're still trying to get over imposter syndrome and all of those things. And I'm confident that together, our community and women like you will be able to continue to drive that culture shift forward. So thank you so much for participating in today's discussion. And Zoe, thank your children for behaving. We appreciated it. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Let's do it again.
Let's do this again.
That's it for our roundtable discussion hosted by Vice President of Learning and Certifications, Par Merat. And we would like to give a big thank you to Par for hosting this conversation, as well as our wonderful guests for sharing their experiences and perspectives. Please stay tuned for our upcoming episodes to continue our series Women in Tech in honor of International Women's Month, which will include interviews with other women ranging from industry experts and career veterans to those who are still starting out in their careers. Please subscribe to the Cisco Learning Network podcast to hear more news about the evolving world of Cisco certifications and to hear stories from others on their certification journeys. And be sure to visit the Cisco Learning Network at learningnetwork.cisco.com. There, you can find all kinds of resources like training videos, study guides, and an entire community of individuals ready to help you in your learning journey. Thanks for listening.